Hello, I'm Jenya DeLima. Welcome to Writing and Editing, the author-focused podcast that takes a whole person approach to everything related to both writing and editing. Have you ever known what you wanted to write? You could envision it perfectly, but then you sat and stared at the blank page for so long your vision started to blur. Sometimes you just need to figure out how to start so we can start. And author, editor, and ghostwriter Alison McBain is here to tell us how to prepare to write a novel. Well, first, thank you for being here, Alison.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
You have an impressive background within publishing, so could you tell us a little bit about that and some of the various roles that you've filled or are currently in?
Yeah, so essentially, I've always wanted to be a writer. So that was like my number one goal ever since I was like a little kid. But along the way, I got a lot of experience. My mom is actually a copy editor, so she was like, "Oh,
Oh,
you should do editing. That would be fun." So I did dabble in editing. I run my own publication. I have a magazine that I publish every month. And I also do freelance editing. And that sort of led to my ghostwriting because I had a client, I sent them edits and they're like, oh, this is great. But, you know, uh, can you do this for me instead? Can you make these
yeah.
changes? I was like, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to give that a try. So it ended up for me wearing a lot of hats and it's fun, like a change is as good as the rest. So it's sort of fun to like, okay, I'll write something for myself. I might write something for a client or do some editing for a client and it keeps everything fresh.
hmm So, moving on to your own writing, then, out of all these various things you do, what does your own preparation look like before you begin to write a novel?
I have actually it's sort of like a 10-step process. It's quite involved. It's funny because when I started out writing, I was a pantser. I wrote by the seat of my
Oh,
pants.
yes.
Yes. But then I kept on writing myself into corners because you don't think a lot ahead when you're a pantser. You're like, okay, I sort of want to end up at this place at the end of the book. And sometimes you might not even know that much, right? So it took a lot of time to sort of rewrite, to edit, to actually get to the ending. And so I started outlining. That sort of led to my huge process where I sort of write everything down before I get started. So I have a really clear roadmap of where I want to go.
Mhm.
So pretty much my process starts with actually, because I write in all genres, my process starts with picking a genre first. Like, for example, last year when I was writing one of my current books, I was like, okay, you know what? One genre I haven't tackled yet, YA horror. I'm going to go for YA horror. And then I start building the story from the ground up from there.
Do you think that it can work for someone to be a pantser?
Oh, definitely. And in fact, like for most of my short stories, because I write short stories and poetry as well, and
Mhm.
definitely for poetry, I still am a pantser.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, definitely. So I get to have the best of both worlds for that. But basically, when I'm writing a book, I start from something small, just as I said, from the genre. Then
Mhm.
I change that into sort of a one sentence story idea, sort of like a
Oh,
log line, like a log
yeah.
line for a screenplay. And then I expand from there. Then I write a 1 to 3 paragraph summary, and then I start doing a chapter by chapter outline. So it's really about building something small and then expanding that to make the whole book. And so after you write your outline, then you're sort of ready to write the whole shebang.
Yeah. Well, going to your first step, what made you decide to pick the genre first rather than, say, the outline first?
Specifically because I work as a ghostwriter also, normally when I take on a project, they tell me the genre. So they'll be like, okay, we're writing a romance, heat level 4, and it has to include, let's say, a billionaire or something,
Yeah.
like just to pick a, and it has to have these tropes. So it can be very specific when I'm given sort of the parameters of what I'm supposed to write for clients. And so like I started building my own novels that way because it just made
Okay.
it easier to start from, something small, which is the genre, like that sort of defines the whole basis of the book. So that can be very helpful in deciding where you want to go with it,
Yeah,
with the
I can see that. And I think this was advice given for starting a webinar, but they were saying that when you don't give yourself those parameters, you're leaving it too open. You have too many possibilities. And then you have something like that analysis paralysis where it's, well, I don't know which of these 500 things I should pick from. But yeah, when you limit it like that, like, okay, billionaire, here's my heat level, here are the genre expectations I know I have to follow. Yeah, I can see that being very helpful in guiding you through what you need to be doing.
Yeah, it definitely can be. And especially as you opened up our talking about the blank page. The blank page is
Yeah.
so intimidating, but if you
Yes.
have all the structure behind it, if you have the skeleton or the roadmap of where you're going to go, it's so much less intimidating. And it really can help you just sit down and be like, okay, I'm writing today. And I know exactly where I'm going to go. I'm going to write, chapter 10 today.
Mhm.
And this is exactly what happens in chapter 10. So it really helps get over that paralysis.
Yeah, I can see that too. And I know that's true even just with like smaller writing tasks that I have to do, where when you don't know what you're doing, it can just feel like this moment of stalling that then extends into what feels like forever. Just because, again, yeah, you're going through, well, should I do this or should I do that? And so a lot of time isn't even spent on necessarily how you would write it or what you want to write, but just figuring out what that item is.
Definitely. And plus, like we have so many distractions these days. So
Yes.
it's like, oh, the blank page is intimidating, but instead I'm going to go check my email, or instead I'm going to, like take my dogs for a walk, or I'm going to, so like we are very wonderfully self-distracting. So it
Hmm.
helps to have that and be like, okay, no distractions. I'm going to sit down. In fact, when I start writing, because I plot out, especially for clients, because I have a deadline, I plot out how much time per day I have to write.
Oh, okay.
So for the 4 hours that day that I'm writing, for example, I will unplug and not look at my email, not look at my phone. I am out of touch for those 4 hours so that I can just really concentrate on it. And that's actually one of my steps. Like
Yeah.
unplugging is key to avoid those distractions.
No, I can see that too. I mean, I think that's true for anything we're doing where it needs that certain level of focus or dedication because it is easy to then say, well, I'm just going to go switch this load of laundry out. I need a break. Maybe if I just take this 5 minutes away, I'll be able to come back refreshed. But then sometimes we don't come back.
That's true. Because there's always stuff to do. And I don't know about you. I work from home.
Hmm.
So and I have kids. So there's always a distraction waiting.
Yes. Well, do you think it's possible to over prep?
Not for myself, but yes, definitely. The possibility is that you will keep just refining and refining your outline. I sort of have specific rules. I'm like, okay, when I do my outline, each chapter by chapter, part of the outline is only like 2 or 3 sentences.
Okay.
I'm not going to go beyond that.
I
Or
do
like,
have
for
a question
example,
about that. Yeah, how
oh yeah,
thorough is
definitely.
your outline? Yes. Because I
Yeah,
can see that becoming almost a form of procrastination. Like, oh,
no, it
my
can
outline
be.
isn't quite where I need it to be yet, so I can't start writing until I have an outline that describes in detail everything they do in scene 7.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I have separate files for each part of it. So, like, in addition to an outline, I do character sketches.
Mm.
In addition to character sketches, I, of course, do research. So, I have a separate file for research. So, I keep them sort of separate.
Hmm.
And once I start writing, then I add to them. So, like, for example, maybe there's a key plot point that is something like, the character hates broccoli. I don't
Yeah.
know. Like, and that's key for the murder scene or something.
Yes.
So then I'll add to my character sketch or my notes that, hey, Anna hates broccoli. That's very, very pivotal for the scene.
I'm already
Um,
thinking how that could be worked in. Like if they come back to the dinner table or something and think, oh no, there was this plate of food left on the table that the murderer left behind, and the only thing they didn't touch was the broccoli.
exactly. That's the murderer. But yeah, so that's part of the process. Like it doesn't have to be perfect when you're going in. You have to have like, again, it's a roadmap. And as you travel that road, you will add to it. You will make stops over here, to check out the world's biggest rubber band ball or something, like so you do have to add to it. It cannot be perfect. Otherwise, again, it's another example of paralysis. You will
Mhm.
focus on that and not get to the actual writing.
Are there ever signs where someone is doing that where it might be a hand that they don't really want to write?
It can be. It's also intimidating, especially when you're working on your first book. There's a writer that I know who has been working on their outline for quite some time. Eventually, you just gotta sit down and start writing, even if it's not perfect. No first draft is perfect. That's the whole thing. Like even you take someone like Stephen King and like his first drafts aren't perfect. I can guarantee it. I've never read one of his first drafts, but I can guarantee they're not perfect the first time around. And he will go through multiple drafts. He will go through editors who help him, the
Hmm.
publisher, etc., before you read what's out on the, bookshelf.
Yeah, and as an editor, I'm sure you've given this advice too. It does get quoted pretty often, and that's I can't edit a blank page. So
Exactly.
yes, just get it out there. And I mean, I think too it might be reassuring for authors to hear that editors are used to seeing really messy first drafts and that we are not judging you on that. This is just part of the process. It's all very normal. We're not expecting something to come to us polished and ready to go.
Definitely. I have a friend who runs a writing group that I go to regularly, and her advice is always write badly. Like write the most terrible first draft you can imagine because it's only up from there, you know?
Yes.
So
I think it was, I quote this all the time, Shauna McGuire on a panel one year, and I think she was quoting someone else, but she just said, you have to give yourself permission to suck. and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
it's
pretty much.
amazing how often I think back to that one line, and it's so simple, and yet it's also so very, very true.
No, that is true. And I especially feel that for myself, that advice I take to heart, especially for poetry, because poetry is very subjective, for
Yes.
example. So it can be really amazing and blow everyone away. It can be really, really terrible. So like the important thing is just getting the idea down and then figuring out which one it is. So like there are so many, I have so many drafts of poetry that will never see the light of day because they suck. And I don't know if I'll ever be able to fix them, and that's okay.
Yeah. Well, so let's also talk about your amazing achievement of writing a book a week and how your prep made that possible.
Yeah, actually, so last year, my project, Author versus AI, was, as you said, to write a book a week over the course of a year and using no AI at all, just using human intelligence as opposed to artificial intelligence. Yeah, I didn't get quite to the full year. My plan was to do 52 weeks. I ended up doing 34 weeks, but not bad. Not bad
No,
for
not
failing
at
that
all.
project. So yeah. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And the preparation did take about 6 months before I
Oh,
started because I had all my books outlined. I had all my character sketches done. I had all my notes and research done before I even sat down and wrote my first book. So, yep, I was just working on the outlines nonstop. And each outline and all the preparation took me about 2 days to a week each, I would say.
okay. Is that normal for you? Not just for this
Yeah,
project, but just in general?
definitely. So depending on how how fast I have to get it done and how much information I have, it could take me a couple days, which is more normal, 2 to 3 days. Sometimes with a harder project, like one that requires a ton of research, like a historical novel, it will take me longer to do. So, or like a science fiction novel where I'm like, okay, I have to make sure if the spacecraft thrusters can really do this or something. So I have to
Yeah.
actually look it up. But yeah, so depending on how much research I need to build the book initially for the important plot points, it can take longer. I keep on researching as I go, of course.
How did you stay motivated to continue writing at the pace that you were writing at?
Well, it's because I love writing. Coming up with this project, it was so ambitious that I was like, oh man, I got to do this. I like to compare it to running a marathon. It takes a lot
Um,
of training ahead of time, but you have to have a love of the sport in order to push yourself to your limits. You have to want to challenge your abilities in order to do that. And I had never done something like this. I hadn't heard of anyone doing something like this.
no, I
So
haven't either.
so I was like, you know what? Yeah, you know what? If I'm going to give it a try and see if I can do it. And maybe someday, because my goal was a year. Maybe someday I'll try it again.
Yeah, I think we usually hear the opposite because even with that write a book in a month, there's so many people about, again, just go back to that messy first draft. It doesn't have to be perfect. But then also people who will argue that for many people, it's not really possible. So I don't know if you have anything to say in response to that.
Yeah, I think that everyone has a story to tell. it is possible to push your limits.
Mhm.
I mean, that's part of why I took on this project was inspiration. So AI has been creeping into the creative sphere, and it's something that everyone talks about these days, right? Not just the creative sphere, but that's where most artists, writers are concerned
Right.
about it. And I've had the reaction, especially from new writers who say, well, why should I even write a book?
Yeah, I've heard that too.
AI can just do it for me. And so part of this was to show that, you know what, AI can write a story. It's
Mhm.
generally not a good story. And it definitely is missing a lot of human elements that make a story great. And so it's to show that maybe you don't have to write a book in a week like I did. But each story is important. Each story is worth telling. And we will continue to dominate that side of it. Humans will, that is, for many years to come. So it's worth it sitting down and writing your story and keep on working on that
Mhm.
for as long as you want.
Yeah, I think what you did is inspiring for a lot of people, or it will be, just because there is that push against AI, and then saying, again, that mentality a lot of people now are adopting where, why should I bother? AI can write it in this amount of time and I can never beat that. But you've proven that you can beat that, and not even just beat it, but with something that's better quality.
I mean, hopefully. So if last year was the year of writing, this year's the year of editing. So that's one thing I've been editing my drafts from last year and slowly starting to send them out. So yeah.
I would still say that, just because even with a lot of the people that are writing with AI, they're then turning to editors and say, can you edit this AI written piece? Make it sound like me, give it my voice. Can you make it sound more human, put more emotion into it? So it's not as if AI is turning out whatever it is and then people are saying, oh, yeah, this is A plus work. No, it still has to go through the editing phase too, quite often, or, well, I mean, it doesn't have to, but people are still choosing to, they're still seeing the value in editing whatever it was. So it's not like you're skipping that step.
No, that's true. Definitely true. And if you've ever read AI generated work, which I've seen for
Yes.
sure, it has a lot of weaknesses. For example, it's really bad at dialogue. Tends
Yes.
not to have very realistic dialogue or emotional reactions of the characters. Those tend to
Mhm.
be off. Another thing, it's very repetitive. So a lot of
Yes.
times
I've seen
it
that too.
loves certain words and it will throw them in even if they're not appropriate.
Or even
So
just the same phrases over and over. It'll,
yes.
yep.
It definitely does that. So like you can tell if you see an AI generated piece, you'll be like, something's off about this. And then you'll start to notice these quirks and be like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, this is why. It's unfortunate that people are trying to use it to sort of skip corners, skip ahead because writing is work too. Like you can love it, but it is work to make it what you see on the shelf. And that's work that I feel like a lot of people using AI don't see and don't appreciate
Yes.
that goes on behind the scenes. They think they can just jump right to the finish line, and it's not like that. It's like any sort of career. You got to put in the time.
Right, exactly. It's not something that should be treated like some get rich quick scheme by
Yeah.
immediately building up your catalog of work, where, work. Not that anyone can see that I just use finger quotes, but I did. Um, so
Yeah,
going
it's not
back,
like winning the lottery. It
yeah,
really isn't. Yeah.
going back to your steps. So after you've done the outline, what are some of the things that come after that?
Yeah, so with the outline, while I'm building the outline, I normally am also doing my character sketches.
Uh,
So I do everything from making sure that the characters have unique names, that I'm not using the same letter too many times. Like I don't want
mhm.
all the characters starting with the letter P, for example. You get
Yes.
very confused very fast. Another important detail about choosing names is making sure that they don't all have the same syllable count. And this is sort of like a very technical thing, but if everyone has like every character has a two-syllable name, they start to sound the same after a while, and it's easy to confuse them in the reader's mind. So making sure that there's that kind of difference between the different character names. I also am a huge proponent of diversity and cultural differences put into the novel. So that's one thing that I do. I choose characters from different backgrounds and make sure that, it makes my novel unique. Each character
Mhm.
feels unique. again, as I'm doing my outline, I'll put in the characters, choose the character names, make sure that each one feels different from each other. And a key part of that, and something that some people might ignore when they're building up their characters, is patterns of speech.
Yes.
So I make sure that each character has something they say, at least one thing they say that is unique, especially for the main characters. So like one character might have an accent, for example, like there's an Irish person in the book or something, and instead of saying you idiot, they'll say you Egypt, so like making sure that they have certain words, like maybe two or three words that is unique to that character.
Mm.
Or like when they're swearing, like maybe one person, instead of saying, I don't know if I can swear here, saying, the sh word, they might say shoot instead because they don't like to swear. And then when things get really bad, maybe a terrible swear word pops out, and that's very unusual for that character. So like I like to keep track of all of these, elements, and then make sure in the editing phase that it's consistent across the whole book.
Do you think someone needs to have a well-developed sense of craft before they go into something like this?
No. Yeah, I mean, this is what I do. So like these are the steps that I do in order to be able to write, especially fast.
Mm.
So these are things that I developed because I did have deadlines to meet for other people and for myself. So you don't necessarily have to take all of these steps. This is just how I found to make it so that I'm not doing the rewriting of things that I already know better
Oh,
than having to do.
got it.
As I said, for my first book, I kept on writing myself into corners. There was way more editing that I had to do rather than writing. So I really wanted to sort of streamline the process and make sure that
Mhm.
I'm not wasting my time. So you can definitely pants your novel. You don't have to do all this preparation, but you can either do it on the front end, like I do, and have all this preparation so that you can just write and hopefully not make as many mistakes. Or you do usually end up doing it on the back end, which is the editing process, self-editing, running it by writers groups, running it by an editor. You should be doing all that stuff still, but it will be more work. And you might be paying an
Yeah.
editor more to catch these simple mistakes that you didn't catch ahead of time.
Is there a step that you didn't originally include in your prep, but you have since added as you've continued writing?
Yeah, definitely. So this process sort of took years to build. So at first I would write sort of like 1 page or 2 page summary of where I was going in the book. And then I didn't find that thorough enough. So then I started doing chapter by chapter outlines. And that was good. But then there were some things about the characters I wasn't clear on. So I'd get the critiques back saying, this character is inconsistent, or, everyone's all going around saying, no, shoot, like, so make
Yeah.
sure that each character sounds distinct. So over time, then I started doing the character sketches and keeping track of dialogue.
Mhm.
And then some of my research, like sometimes I would be in the editing phase and I'd be like, oh, where did I find, that in the 1700s, the Europeans were using this particular type of sailing vessel. And then I would have to go back and like look through all my notes, so like having those notes there was helpful.
Mhm. Do you have a place online anywhere, maybe a blog entry where you've outlined all of these steps and maybe what they look like for you?
Yeah, definitely. So, not all of the steps, I'm still making videos, but I have a YouTube channel,
Oh,
and you can find that through my author versus
oh
AI.com
yeah, I visited that
website.
earlier.
Yeah. So I try to make it easy, and especially, in today's day and age, like most people aren't necessarily reading a whole bunch of writing tips.
Mhm.
So I did these short little videos outlining each step of the process from beginning to end, basically, like how to choose a genre, how to outline your story, how to do your character sketches, etc. So, yep, those are all on my website.
Well, and as an editor and ghostwriter, are there any common prep mistakes that you see authors making?
Oh, yes.
Let's hear them.
Yeah, there's a lot, like overtelling, I would say, is a common
Mhm.
mistake for first-time authors because they have all the information in their head and they just want to get it out on the page. But then you get these huge chunks of info dump. So you might have pages and pages of them just explaining stuff, which is not storytelling. And that's good to have. Usually when I have that, I switch it over to my notes section. I take it out of the actual book and put it in notes. So I have that information because that information is important, but it shouldn't make it onto the page. because most of the information, the way that you want to convey information to the reader is through the character's actions, through the character's dialogue, through what actually happens to them and how they react.
Yep, exactly. Well, do you think that there are additional steps that authors should take and with their prep before they send the manuscript to an editor?
Yeah, once you finish your manuscript, definitely you want to first go over it yourself and make sure that you self-edit the heck out of that thing. But also, it's very, very important to send it by other people, to have a writing group to look at it, to have beta readers, because you pay an editor either by the word or by the hour. And you want to catch all those very basic mistakes that you can't see because
Yes.
you're too close to the manuscript, and have someone else do that for you. And it's also great to build a rapport with other writers in your genre because it's great to help each other out. You know, writers are very helpful creatures. We like to help each other out because we're still feeling our way. I still feel like a newbie even after being in the business for over a decade. There are always things to learn from other writers, things that I'm like, oh my goodness, I wish I had thought of that. That's amazing. So you're always learning your craft. So having a network of fellow writers that you can turn to is essential.
If you had to leave listeners then with just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of the blank page. Even if you don't follow my process, work out your own process.
Mhm.
Just sit down and write. Find out what story you need to tell because I believe that everyone has a story to tell and tell it. Write it down. It doesn't have to be perfect the first time around, but it's important to highlight. It's important to tell your story.
Well, fantastic advice, and thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me on. It was wonderful.
Thanks. And thank you for listening, and be sure to check out the show notes for additional information, including all of Allison's links and to her YouTube channel. And then please join me next week when author Wendy Holden will be here to talk about writing about historical tragedy. Thanks again.